All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? We've covered a lot of different genres of movies on the show. Everything from, hot couch guy movies to based lib movies. But there's something that we've never really covered before, which is a Western.
Yeah, I guess not, huh? We talked about Observe and Report, which is also about, has, I would say, a similar protagonist to most Westerns.
Yes, that is very true. So I guess that's probably the closest thing I could think of. But we've never actually reviewed like a straight up Western. And, I was perusing Amazon the other day. I found a movie that said it was a Western. All the people in the Amazon reviews said it was a Western, and I watched it. And you know what, Brian? It was woke garbage by our SJW fucking least favorite director, S Craig Zahler. And I was so fucking pissed by the end of it. I took my anti-woke beer and I fucking threw it against the wall and I called my wife a bitch. I was so mad after watching this piece of shit.
When were saying that you said a woke Western, I thought maybe you were talking about The Searchers. Because whenever I watch The Searchers, I'm just so upset that they're saying that John Wayne's character in there is the villain. Because he so clearly should be the protagonist.
Exactly. And all of our protagonists in this movie are villainized as murderers, which obviously we know every settler in the West was a good, honest man and never killed anybody, obviously. And I was fucking pissed when I found out the pansiest, most just woke loser, S. Craig Zahler, our least favorite director, directed a fucking Western. I was so mad.
But what else will you expect from Zahler? He's already trying to make all the kids gay. He's putting litter boxes in the schools. You know that's what Dragged Across Concrete was about. It should have been called Dragged Across City Litter.
Yeah, the litter box was dragged across the concrete of the fucking gymnasium. Oh, Jesus. But yes, with this intro out of the way, our review this week is the S. Craig Zahler movie, Bone Tomahawk. Hilariously enough, the first movie, and it's our very last S. Craig Zahler movie. But before we get into our review this week, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Generational Moment of the Week.
Week.
Woo! Yeah! All right. And, we're talking about a woke film director here, S. Craig Zahler, very famous woke director, S. Craig Zahler here. I decided to cover a very hilarious woke article from one of the greatest artists of our time, and that is Shaun Morgan, the vocalist of the butt rock band Seether. Now, you may be thinking, why the fuck would I talk about the vocalist of Seether in the year of our Lord 2024? Well, I found an article from 2013. Shaun Morgan, once again, the vocalist of the band Seether, is from South Africa. They're actually a South African band. And I thought to myself, I wonder what they have to say about Nelson Mandela and apartheid, because it is a white band of butt rock guys. And I'm thinking, oh, I bet they have really good opinions on Nelson Mandela and the anti-apartheid movement. But would you believe it or not, Brian, they actually have really good opinions on Nelson Mandela. I was genuinely shocked when I found this article.
When you initially told me that, I was shocked, and then I was thinking on it a little bit. And Seether suck. I'm not.
Oh yeah, terrible band.
Not here to defend Seether's music, but I was kind of thinking on it, and basically all I know about Seether really other than that Amy Lee ballad, that they basically like dick ride for like Nirvana, right? Like they sound like shitty Nirvana, or they think they sound like shitty Nirvana.
Exactly.
And so I was thinking like, well, if you're a guy of a certain age, like the Seether guy's age, and you're like, I'm like Kurt Cobain, you basically have to support Nelson Mandela, right?
I mean, you'd think, but like most of the post-grunge guys are super reactionary. Like, especially like the American and Canadian ones are basically 201, like all MAGA shitheads, like 201.
Yes, but I don't think most of those bands, I wouldn't say, are specifically aping Nirvana in the same way that Seether are. And that's my take on this. This is not necessarily that Seether are so good, but that they did the bare minimum of like liberal virtue signaling because they knew that Kurt Cobain would have wanted them to, is my take.
Yes, and let's get into the article then, because holy shit, this article is absolutely hilarious. And to be fair, it's very heartfelt. It's a type of hot couch guy that we haven't really talked about in a while, which is like a really dumb based lib hot couch guy, which is a thing that totally existed in the 2000s, but really doesn't exist
Big
anymore.
Time. They all turned into like dirtbag left guys.
That's true, yeah.
I'm serious.
back in the day in like 2004, like a guy who woke up like in just a pile of like bags of chips, like
Yeah.
Slim Jim wrappers and like a fucking dirty bong next to him. He's like, oh shit, I really got tuned into the 2004 presidential debate real quick.
Yeah, like the upwardly mobile guys, they stayed Democrats, and the downwardly mobile ones, they were like the prototypes to the dirtbag left.
That is true. Yeah, the upwardly mobile ones eventually ended up like living in fucking Lincoln Park in Chicago and like make $150,000 a year and have like Warren signs in their yards now. That's what those
Yeah.
types of guys are. Oh God. But yeah, so the article here is from Loudwire. And the header of the article says here, South African rocker Shaun Morgan of Seether shares memories of Nelson Mandela. Now, this article came out a couple days after Nelson Mandela died.
Memories? Like did he meet him?
Oh, get ready, Brian, because this is fucking hilarious. So this article came out about 4 days after Nelson Mandela died. So the body of the article says, Seether frontman Shaun Morgan is the latest rocker to pay tribute to Nelson Mandela. A huge amount of musicians and other public figures have memorialized Mandela since he passed away on December 5th. But as a native South African, well, not really native South African, you know what I mean, whatever. Morgan's statement is unique as he witnessed firsthand what it was like in his home country when Mandela was released from prison after 27 years. And they list other people that have mentioned them, but whatever. Let's get into the article here. So, Seether Shaun Morgan wrote about how he saw South Africa change after Mandela's release from prison in 1990. And this is all of Shaun Morgan's words after this is the rest of the article here. So, he says, I can remember the moment I watched Nelson Mandela walk out after prison after his 27 years of incarceration. I was sitting in my uncle's house, surrounded by family, and I was transfixed by a monumental moment in history that I couldn't even fathom at the time. I was privileged to be witnessing history and the transformation of the country I grew up in. I was watching my world change, and I had no idea what was in store for me. It was 1990. I was 12 years old. All I knew was that it was going to be fucking epic. I'm sorry, like that is such a fucking like elderly millennial. That's like such a Reddit thing to think. Like, oh man,
racial integration is gonna be fucking epic. It is gonna fucking own. Yeah, I think it's gonna be pretty fucking sweet when black people can drink from water fountains and go to school.
You know, to be fair though, obviously we consider that cringy, but that is the correct opinion to have. Like, I mean,
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. I mean, I hope anyone listening to this understands why this is funny to us.
Yeah. Suddenly, all the whites only signs on the beaches I'd been to as a kid started disappearing. Those obnoxious Swartz Aline signs started getting pulled down. No longer were the whites of South Africa being handed the prime real estate of the beaches, or indeed, the country in general. Change was in the fucking wind. I'm sorry,
this guy rules.
This guy fucking rules. I wish this music didn't suck so bad.
Well, what I remember about Seether's music, right, is it really bad or is it just really boring? I only know
it's very boring. It's very boring.
I know Back to the Remedy, that's them, right?
Yeah, like it's the most 5 out of 10 butt rock of all time. It's not awful, but it's not good. Just objectively, it's just not very good. But hey, once again, at least he has good opinions on race.
Well, okay, well, hang on. I'm not trying to be a dick. This guy seems nice. I have no reason to think he has bad opinions on race. But I mean, this is like kind of the bare minimum. Right.
But once again, we have to talk about like butt rock. Like this would be like
You're
the
right.
woke SJW rainbow haired version of like butt rock guys. So
wait.
We have to grade on a curve. We have to grade on a curve here.
I gotta push back because Nickelback wrote an Occupy Wall Street song in like 2018.
Yeah, you're right. Nickelback are like bass libs. Like they're Canadian bass libs. That is
they wrote songs about how you shouldn't beat up your wife.
Yeah.
Like, also, if I met a guy who beat up his wife, I would beat him up.
And also, they wrote the song where if everyone cared, nobody died. You know, the most based ballad of all time.
You know, I don't want to be too much of a dick to the Seether guy because it seems like obviously he's a good guy based on all the information we have here. But boy, if he had some like kind of like centrist lib takes, it would be awesome to be like a centrist lib and then call your brand Seether, just constantly seething as you get owned.
Yeah. Oh, shit. So the next time I went to school, it was very different. I started 7th grade, or standard 5th in South Africa at the time, and I was suddenly exposed to, gasp, black kids at school with me. It was such a novelty and so interesting and different. I had never seen black children in uniform, let alone at reputable schools. I had grown up with black friends my age on the farm in Thornville, KwaZulu-Natal, but we had come from such different backgrounds. This was a new beast, and I loved it. He was my stuffy English government school in Peter Maritzburg. That's my best pronunciation of that. That was suddenly accepting kids of all races. Black, Indian, Chinese, everyone. It was fucking weird, man.
But yeah, again, I don't want to make fun of him too hard. It's not like what he's saying. It's like he's using this very 2000s like fucking epic like badass kind of vernacular, you know? He's being very epic about it.
It's so sincere, you just can't hate on it. And I can't hate, like I'm laughing, but I genuinely can't hate on it.
Well, what I'm curious about, and I don't blame him for not getting into this, what do we think his family was like? Do we think he came from a family of South African-based libs, or do we think he came from a pretty reactionary family?
I'm gonna guess
Obviously,
because it goes into the article later about like a kid he went to school with and like just the like it seemed like there was a lot of privilege. So I'm gonna assume there probably wasn't a lot of base libs in this family, and I'm assuming that him getting into like Nirvana and like, you know, post grunge and stuff like was actually like probably like a very rebellious reaction to probably the stuffy upbringing that he had. So I'm gonna assume probably not a lot of base libs in the family would be my guess. I could be wrong about that, but I'm gonna guess probably not.
We have to give him extra points for that then, if that's what we think, right? We gotta...
No, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's one of those things where especially a lot of the indoctrination that a lot of people had at the time, I mean, fucking shit. Like,
so that's cool, but also I love that he's like, man, I remember the first time I saw a Chinese kid, I was like, damn, that shit's crazy.
Oh, so the article finishes up here. Nelson Mandela changed my life and changed the country I call home. He actually hasn't lived in South Africa in like 20 years, but hey, whatever, that's fine. I read that up later. I'm like, wait, does he still live in South Africa? And he does not.
Of course not.
He was an amazing man that achieved more than I could ever hope to. We, as South Africans, can never even begin to explain how much we love this man. He was our father, our grandfather, our motherfucking Madiba. He was the reason any of us had hoped to believe that we could break barriers and become more than life had restricted us to, based on socio-political standing. He made us all believe that we could be anything we believed in our hearts we were meant to be. He is a symbol of strength and unity, and he was the best fucking South African to ever live. I hope that I could be a tenth of the man he was. God, I'd settle for 100. Rest in peace, Madiba. Thank you for the way you changed my life. Thank you for the lessons I learned from you. Thank you. There's a void in this world that will never be filled. Hopefully he got as much of a kick out of the poser a-holes who wrote their obligatory tweets of remorse for his passing as I did. There is nothing in this world that offends me more than fake fucking condolences. I only know how to say this in Zulu to show respect for a Xhosa man. Hamba Kale Madiba. Lala Kale.
So I gotta say, just to do a little test, because he's South African, as you were finishing that article, I searched Shaun Morgan, Seether, Elon Musk, and you know what? I found no results.
Oh, fucking thank God.
I know. I was just, as you were going, I was like, you know, let's just check and see.
Yeah, what if Shaun Morgan
has never caped for Elon.
Thank God. I would love if there's a tweet where he's like, I wish he would, if it was up to me, I would murder all of his children. Like he'd be like a South African based lib, but
oh my God, that would own so much. He'd be like, I'm gonna go fuck crimes in the ass.
Oh God, but you know, we were talking about obviously great individuals, but shitty artists. So let's get into our review here of Bone Tomahawk. As we can all agree, a shitty artist, but a great individual, S Craig Zahler. I mean, to be fair, I don't know S Craig Zahler as an individual, but...
Flip that, reverse it.
Oh, I'm kidding. I mean, to get my thoughts out of the way, this is a fucking great movie. We were joking earlier. We are not dumb Amazon reviewers who just looked at the poster and were like, I'm going to like this, and then hated it, like all of the reviews that I found here. We like this movie. I want to be very clear here. We're joking. We think S. Craig Zahler is a reactionary visionary, if that's a possibility in the year of our Lord 2024.
No, he absolutely is. And that's the thing. We've touched on it before. There used to be a lot of like actual like reactionary auteur filmmakers. And as everything has become more kind of codified and culture war has become more divisive, you're kind of losing that because it becomes impossible to be a reactionary with any sort of artistic conviction, you know? Zahler is kind of a holdout to like the 70s or 80s type of reactionary artist, I would say.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you know, we're talking about fucking Clint Eastwood is another good example. Like, I wouldn't say he's making as good a movies as S. Craig Zahler, but he's still fucking trying, you know? Or, you know, you're talking about The Wild Bunch, which a lot of people compare this movie to, spoilers ahead, but, you know, Sam Peckinpah is another great reactionary auteur, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Sam Peckinpah, absolute madman. We'll find some excuse to talk about him on the show. But yeah, like watching this film, the specter of, I would say, like, of course, High Plains Drifter and Unforgiven, the Eastwood Westerns, but also the Wild Bunch, like, looms heavy over this movie.
Yeah, goddamn.
And also Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls.
Oh man, I'm so excited to get into the synopsis here, but let's get into the details real quick. So this movie came out in 2015, and the first trivia fact I had here is this movie was shot in 21 days, which is just absolutely fucking insane because there's a lot.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
sets for this
crazy.
movie. There's like 30 credited actors, like just insane. But yeah, they shot this movie in 21 days, which is just
Well,
fucking
and
nuts.
some pretty impressive cinematography,
Yes, absolutely. So very impressive cinematography, great fucking set design. We were joking the other week that like movies just kind of look boring and shitty nowadays. But
Well,
like,
I wasn't joking. I was serious. They do.
no, I was being serious too. But the fact that S Craig Zahler is making some of the more interesting visually movies is like really damning because like his movies aren't necessarily that visually impressive. They're just a breath of fresh air in comparison to some of the shit we've seen in theaters.
You know what it is you can tell he likes movies.
Yes, 100%.
When I watch these movies, I can tell they are made by a guy who likes film. He likes the genres he's working in. He likes kind of the tropes that he's both paying tribute to and subverting. In the same way, and they're not similar filmmakers, but in the same way, when I watch a Tarantino film, I'm like, oh, this is made by a guy who like loves film. And I think that shines through.
Yeah, fucking absolutely. And then speaking of loving movies, so this was not rated by the MPAA or MPA, just like Brawl and Cell Block 99. It was once again directed by S. Craig Zahler, and most of the rest of the credits are the exact same as Brawl and Cell Block 99, so I'm just going to power through these. So it was written by him as well. And the next trivia fact I had here is that this was the first draft of the script in the movie, which is fucking insane as well. Because it flows very well, especially for a first draft is insane to me. Like no edits, no fucking nothing. Like just crazy to me that because I was watching the special features and like Dallas Saunier and Jack Heller were like, yeah, he just literally gave us a script that he wrote and he said, yeah, just make the fucking movie. And I was like, okay, I didn't even know that was a thing you could fucking do in Hollywood anymore. Like absolutely fucking crazy. And another
thing
yeah,
where I think you can see it being a first draft shining through is maybe that there are a lot of really insane choices made in this that had this film gone through multiple drafts, studios or someone might have tried to have kind of hack out of it. But some of the really extreme choices in here like kind of make it make sense to me that it would be the first and only draft of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, totally. And like once we get to the synopsis there, I want to point out scenes that I'm pretty sure were a first draft for sure. And then the next trivia fact I had here, the movie was based partially on H. Rider Haggard's novels Lost, Race Tales, and The Virginian, which are, of course, books I've never heard of because I don't read because I'm illiterate, of course.
I've never fucking heard of those.
I haven't either, but S. Craig Zahler is a man with a lot of influences, a man who is involved in a lot of different artistic mediums, so I'm sure he's probably a little bit more well-read than both us illiterate hillbillies. And speaking of illiterate hillbillies, so this movie was once again produced by Jack Heller and Dallas Saunier, who produced all of S. Craig Zahler's 3 movies so far. And this movie is about 132 minutes long. It had a budget of about $1.8 million and it grossed $475,846. So this is still, I think, the highest grossing S. Craig Zahler movie because all the other two got made like fucking $32 at the box office combined. Like those movies made no money at all.
Well, I can kind of see why this movie might, even though it's no less extreme than his other films, maybe because it's a Western, there's a little bit more remove from the kind of subject matter in this versus like watching Draped Across Concrete in an era where there's constantly news stories about police violence and things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, and I totally forgot to mention, so Jack Heller, he produced all of S. Craig Zahler's movies, and he also produced a movie about MoviePass for some reason. It's like a biopic of MoviePass that I saw be like paraded on Twitter like a week ago or something, and I'm like, all right, well, I guess fucking S. Craig Zahler's producer is making some stupid biopic about MoviePass. And Dallas Saunier, once again, produced all of S. Craig Zahler's movies, and now he just produces Daily Wire slop. He used to publish Fangoria for a couple of years and then had to give it up because one of his producers raped a bunch of women. So obviously that's great, but just had to get a quick recap of that.
So is the rapist working for the Daily Wire now too, or?
I mean, that's everybody in the Daily Wire. That's just a redundant statement, Brian.
Well, you got me there.
Yeah. On Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a 91% critic score and a 74% audience score. So this is also S. Craig Zahler's highest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes, just by 1%, because Brawl and Cell Block 9 had a 90%. I think Dragged Across Concrete had like a 74, 73, I want to say. And I remember we mentioned it on the Dragged Across Concrete episode. I was like, that's his most divisive film critically. And I was shocked by when I saw that at the time, because I'm like, man, if we love this movie that much, like, imagine what his other two movies are like, and now we've fucking seen them. So, I mean, shit.
Well, like I would say, like Dragged Across Concrete is a pretty impenetrable movie in a way that I don't think that Brawl or Bone Tomahawk quite are. Like it's easier to come at these films and go like, okay, these are movies, even if there's some dodgy stuff to get into. Whereas Dragged Across Concrete, you kind of have to steel yourself for, right?
No, I 100% agree. Yeah, that is a very inaccessible movie for most general audiences, where like Bone Tomahawk, and trust me, once we get to the Amazon reviews, oh boy, these Amazon reviews, but like a lot of people watch this movie on Amazon, like a lot. So like that was a movie that appealed to a lot of people, but once people got into it, I think it was a little bit more impenetrable than I think they probably would have been ready for. But like aesthetically speaking, this movie does have the aesthetics of a Western. You know what I mean?
And it's got Kurt Russell. Like,
yeah, exactly. He looks like fucking Wyatt Earp, but 30 years later. Like, oh, but God, speaking of, so let's get into the synopsis here. So, movie is set in the 1890s. Brigands Purvis, played by David Arquette, and Buddy, played by Sid Haig, which I remember when I first like put this movie on. And also the movie starts, by the way, with these two guys just like slicing dudes' necks with like literally no dialogue, just a guy getting his fucking throat slit like immediately. That's how the movie begins.
yeah.
It's a pretty rough opening to the movie, but I mean, I was just like, oh shit. But yeah, I saw Sid Haig and I was like, wait, is that Sid Haig? And like, I had to think about it because I'm like, oh, that's right. Sid Haig hadn't died yet when this movie fucking was made. Because Sid Haig died like 2 years after this movie came out. He was probably already dealing with cancer at this point. Speaking of, you know what his last movie was, right, Brian?
What was it?
It was Three from Hell, the third movie in the Devil's Rejects House of Thousand Corpses series. And, you know, that's a movie, those two movies are absolutely movies we're going to have to review for the pod someday because they're so indicative of like 2000s horror. Like, Rob Zombie really did usher in 2000s horror in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. So I would love to talk about Devil's Rejects. Like, that's such an of its time movie.
It is 100%.
I mean, they all are, but that one especially, I think.
Well, Brian, you know, we talk about a movie of its time. Imagine Devil's Rejects, but it comes out 13 years later and Sid Haig isn't in it because he died. Does that sound really good?
Well, you know, of course. Any Rob Zombie movie made after 2005 or whatever sounds great to me.
Yeah, I can tell you what, Three from Hell was one of the biggest piles of shit I've ever seen in my life. That movie is garbage. Like, genuinely awful. Even by Rob Zombie standards, I was shocked by how terrible that movie was.
Do you at least get a really good performance by a Sherry Moon zombie or whatever the fuck?
She's fine, but she's obviously very much phoning in that performance, too. I mean, she doesn't really even have to fucking try. I mean, she's Rob Zombie's wife. She's going to be in his movies no matter what. But yeah, so these two gentlemen encounter a Native American burial site. They are ambushed, and Buddy is killed while Purvis escapes. And also, it's one of those things where a lot of people, once we get to the later part of the synopsis, spoilers ahead, but there's a lot of excruciating violence at the end of this movie. And I think a lot of people weren't paying attention because Sid Haig gets like fucking gutted. I mean, it's kind of in the background, so it's kind of hard to see unless you're like squinting, but like he's being gutted by these like fucking ghost-like beings. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing is, one of the things when we were talking about this film in Messenger, you had said a lot of people are kind of shocked by the violence towards the end of the film. But for me, once this movie starts to ramp up, for me, that all clicked because one of my thoughts when this movie starts right away is like, oh, it feels like a horror film. Like, it doesn't feel like a Western in terms of its pacing and its tone. And so I was kind of like, okay, something is going to happen here. This is going to take some sort of wrench is going to be thrown into the plans that make this tougher than a normal Western. So it's funny to me that people watched this and I don't know what they expected to happen at the end, just like a John Wayne shootout.
Yeah. Hello, Pilgrim, I'm here to save you. And then they just get saved.
Was that like what people were waiting for?
I think it was. And like I said, once we get to the Amazon reviews, trust me, we're going to find some real dumbos. But anyways, Purvis reaches a nearby town, Bright Hope, and buries his loot. Seeing this, Deputy Chicory, played by Richard Jenkins, who, when I finished this movie, I was like watching the special features and I saw him and I'm like, is that the fucking dad from Step Brothers? And it is the dad from Step Brothers. I'm like, I never would have guessed that unless I saw the special features. Because, like,
Yeah,
he is not that guy at all.
No, and that didn't even occur to me. And then as soon as you said that to me, I looked at his face and I was like, oh my God, it is. And I couldn't unsee it all of a sudden.
I mean, he's a great character actor if he's able to disappear like that, though. I mean, holy shit.
His character in this film is pretty devastating.
Yes, very much so. But yes, he reports the individual Purvis to Sheriff Franklin Hunt, played by Kurt Russell, who interrogates then shoots Purvis in the leg when he attempts to escape. Now, I also love the bar scene because there's a lot of characters get set up here. There's the bartender, which there's another S. Craig Zahler like mainstay because that guy was in the other two S. Craig Zahler movies. And I was like, wait, this guy looks familiar. And I looked him up and like, oh, okay, I remember that character in both the S. Craig Zahler movies. You know what I'm talking about, right, Brian?
Yes. Well, he's part of the
Zahlerverse?
Yeah.
the Zahlerverse. Hunt sends the confident gunslinger John Bruder, played by Matthew Fox, to fetch the town's doctor to tend to Purvis's leg wound. However, he fetches Samantha O'Dwyer, played by the actress Lily Simmons, the doctor's daughter and assistant, who is caring for her injured husband Arthur, played by Patrick Wilson. Now, I mentioned a lot of names there. Patrick Wilson was also kind of a big star at this point because he was in the fucking Conjuring movie, the first Conjuring movie. So the fact that S. Craig Zahler was able to get a guy who was in The Conjuring, which made $7 trillion at the box office, is kind of impressive, too, to be honest with you. I was like, does fucking Patrick Wilson have, like, a long-standing relationship with Dallas Saunier and Jack Heller or S. Craig Zahler? Like, what the fuck?
Also, I guess if you are known as the Conjuring guy, maybe you are kind of enthusiastic to get a role like this, maybe something a little more, I don't know, serious or whatever. So it's probably mutually beneficial for both of them, too,
That's very true. Hunt then leaves Samantha in the sheriff's office with his other deputy, Nick, played by the actor Evan Jonah-Keat, to tend to Purvis's wounds. That night, a nearby stable boy is killed. Hunt learns of the murder and goes to his office, finding it empty, with an arrow left behind. A character known only as the Professor, played by Zahn McClarnon, an educated Native American, links the arrow to a tribe that he refers to as troglodytes and locates the valley they inhabit on a map. He warns Hunt that they are a group of inbred cannibals, shunned and avoided by other native tribes. Certain that Samantha, Nick, and Purvis have been captured by them, Hunt forms a rescue party with Chicory and Bruder. Arthur insists on accompanying them to find his wife despite his injury. Now, a lot of things happen in this specific scene, but this is a very interesting moment that, we talked about, obviously, how in other movies with S. Craig Zahler, like in Brawl in Cell Block 99, when he's like berating, not necessarily berating, but, shaming the guy for using the N-word or whatever. I think this is a very interesting moment that S. Craig Zahler is trying to use to sort of cover his very reactionary viewpoint, where he brings a, like, quote-unquote civilized native to come and is like, oh, that's not
yeah,
like
that
us.
doesn't make it better.
No,
that
not only it doesn't.
Worse.
That does make it worse, but also I think it's very interesting, too, that John Bruder? Yeah, John Bruder goes up to the professor and he's like, well, I've killed 116 savages. And he goes like, well, that's not a great boast. And he's like, I'm not boasting. So it's like, who is the voice here? Who is the passive voice saying that's a good or bad thing, that this guy's a mass murderer of Native Americans? Like, I don't know. It comes across a little bit more clumsy, obviously, than Brawl in Cell Block 99. But I genuinely think he did that to try to, like, step aside some of the criticism of this movie, because this movie is very racist. Like, let's be clear here.
Yeah, let's get it out of the way here. Like, we've gone on record saying we think Zahler is a very talented filmmaker. Watching movies perspective, I like his movies. This is pretty unsettlingly racist. The antagonists of these movies are monstrous and, as you said, demon-like Native Americans.
Yeah. That, once again, that the good natives, the quote-unquote good natives, the very whitewashed natives think are, like, fucking savages.
The assimilated, the one assimilated native character. Yeah.
But, what's even interesting for that is that, like, and, obviously we're not going to get into the whole 400, or not, fucking 700-year fucking, history of genocide against Native Americans by, white settlers. But, like, it's also interesting that they have him be the quote-unquote, like, civilized one, because he also has long hair. And settlers did not like natives with long hair. They would have fucking, like, cut that dude's hair off immediately. So I also find that very interesting.
Well, the reason he has long hair is because that allows a modern American audience to immediately perceive him as Native American. Like,
that's a good point, actually. I didn't think of that. That is a good point.
That's so that people like us can, watching this in modern day, can immediately go, oh, that's a Native American guy. That's why he has hair like that.
Even though, it's not like we grew up in a fucking region of the country that actually has a significant like Native American population.
Right.
So, but I mean, on other people don't have that. So, but yeah, but no, totally. I totally get what you're saying. But yeah, that whole scene is full of so much ideology. It's hilarious. Maybe the most ideological scene in the whole movie. It's a great scene, don't get me wrong, but it is a movie it is a scene that Zahler is very clearly trying to sidestep some of the inevitable controversy that's going to come with this movie by just acknowledging it, but not in a very woke way. I'll just say that.
So it seems as good a time to get into it as any. I went on record saying that I don't think that Brawl is particularly ideological compared to compared to Drive Across Concrete, and certainly not compared to like this. I think that of his three movies, this is probably the one, even more than Drive Across Concrete. And it's also probably my favorite just as a film. I think it is probably the most successful and most well crafted. But this is a movie where I watch this and I go like, oh, there is some weird right-wing stuff going on in this movie.
Boy, is there fucking ever. Like, holy shit, is there ever. And like, we talked about this movie being more of a horror than a Western, although obviously it has the aesthetics of a Western. It plays more like a horror movie. But like, obviously with any kind of Western, the right-wing politics are kind of baked into it. So it's obviously very hard. Like, you could never make I was making a joke about like a woke Western. Like, the closest thing I can think about is fucking Blazing Saddles, and that's a comedy.
Yeah, Blazing Saddles, which is a comedy. The other response to that, and this is a thing, I think a good thing to get into since we're going to be comparing Bone Tomahawk to these films, those kind of new Hollywood, the Eastwood films, the spaghetti westerns, those are almost like what we might be able to call woke from a certain kind of perspective because, and one thing that I think Bone Tomahawk does, and it's in that tradition, is it's taking like the origin myth of America, the John Wayne kind of Western manifest destiny thing, and it takes that and it replaces it with another myth that's just as fictional, but is like deeply unpleasant, which is that this is this world of constant violence and like hellish rape and just mutilation. And again, like demon-like Native Americans that fucking eat people. And you're kind of going like, okay, we're going to replace this really squeaky clean, nationalist origin myth with this thing, with these stories, which are probably just as fake, but make you kind of look at it as like, oh, this is like a country built on like, I guess, steely kind of perseverance and death and, molestation. And I would say that Bone Tomahawk is in that tradition. Maybe it's not woke in that there's no, first of all, it's not so much about educating people about why that's bad. It's just sort of wallowing in it,
The only thing I can think of that makes this movie obviously very woke too is that, the quote unquote troglodytes kill a black boy and they don't eat him because they're cannibals. They're like, well, they don't like eating black people. And I'm like, you racist troglodytes. It's free food at that point. What the? No, I'm kidding. But they do acknowledge that scene in the movie too. And I'm like, I remember because I totally missed it my first watch through. And I'm like, but why don't they eat black people? Yeah. Like, I was just like, okay, it's like a throwaway line that really caught me off guard my second watch, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Well, so thinking about that, right? Because presumably, like, my read on that is that there is some sort of racist motivation for them not to, like, probably that they eat people who they want to, like, absorb in some way. This is like the myth of, like, tribes that cannibalize people, right? Or the perception of them is that they eat someone so that they can fully conquer and, like, absorb them. And so for whatever reason, the quote unquote troglodytes, God, I hate saying it, man.
Yeah.
I hate saying it. They feel like black people like aren't worthy of that from them, of being absorbed by them in that way. Layers of bad stuff that I don't like saying out loud going on.
Yeah. Oh shit. All right. After that very ideological scene, they finally get into their ride. Two strangers stumble across the rescue party's camp after, I think it's like the first night. They are killed by Bruder, who fears they are scouts for a raid. The rescue party set up a new camp, but they are ambushed by raiders who injure Bruder's horse and steal the rest. Now, there's a lot of scenes like this. They try to find a place to stay. They have to kill a bunch of people or their shit gets raided or whatever. A lot of those scenes happen. But I think it's very interesting that, like, we're talking about how it's like a horror movie. That's also like a very horror movie premise. Like, there are people on the road trying to find something and they just find just just shit is always fucking like trying to kill them or get in their way, which I think is very interesting.
They have left their bubble of like their kind of oasis, which for the characters in this movie is their little town, which probably was already not that safe. They leave that and they are immediately besieged by basically shadows in the night to kill them at all times. They have to set up elaborate systems of pulleys and bells to warn them of encroaching murderers at any moment.
Yeah. And we were talking about, of course, Mr. O'Dwyer earlier, but also it's obviously for the movie, and I understand it's his wife who is kidnapped, but this guy is like fucking crippled. He's got like a broken, like infested, like diseased leg, and he's expected to make a 5-day journey in 2 days. They say that in the movie.
They shouldn't have let him come with. This is the thing. I understand that, like, and I can admire that in the context of this movie, and maybe even in the historical context. I don't know. Maybe there's this thing of like, well, this is his wife, and he's a man, and we need to respect that he wants to be a man and be part of this journey with us. But at some point, maybe they should have been like, hey, you being here is bad for you. It's bad for your wife, but it's also bad for us. Like, they should have just been like, no, calm the down, and you're going to stay here. And you're going to go sleep it off.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, when we look at our motley crew, our cast of characters, even if he wasn't wounded, even if he was in peak health, he didn't have a fucking gangrenous leg, he'd be the person in the crew that contributes the least. Other than it being his wife that's like been abducted, he is the most useless person in this team.
And one of them is like a 75-year-old man. He's still the most useless. Like,
well, he's like a doctor, right? He's got some level of
that's true. Yeah, he is
real world medical expertise, and he's been right. He was like a doctor in the war, right? Presumably in what the
Civil War, I would assume. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so he has more actual life experience and some knowledge, and even if he's like almost 80, he has some perspective he could bring to this. The O'Dwyer character, pain in the ass.
He's always breaking his leg again. Like
like how many fucking times can you break it?
He broke it like 15 times.
I don't understand how breaking a bone works. I think that once you break a bone one time, it just stays that way and it can't get worse.
Well, it could have been like a compound break, and back in the day, that would have just been an amputation.
Oh, that would have been, yeah. Well, that's the thing is like, there are points here where as this character's health gets worse, the rest of the crew, the rest of his team kind of say, well, what do you want us to do? That wouldn't happen in real life.
No, that would not.
So we're not there yet, but I just feel like this is the point to get in. At the point where the doctor is saying, we should probably amputate your leg. What do you want to do? And he says, no, they would have just cut it off, right?
Yeah, they would have 100% just cut it off, yeah.
They would not have been like, okay, I respect your bodily autonomy to let your fucking leg die on your body.
Nope. Especially, back in 1890s when this movie was set, they would have just fucking amputated it.
I'm sorry, I don't like this fucking character. And you'd think I would, because he's a well-written character. He's kind of one of the emotional cores of the movie, because he's just the guy that wants his wife back. He's just worried about his wife. It's a very compelling thing, but he's also fucking annoying.
Yeah. And, there's also a point where she wants him to read a quote-unquote poem, and it's not a poem, but it's like just like a sweet little thing that he wrote while he was away before he was able to come back home, basically, and he didn't read it to her. And I think that's like obviously a very prime motivation for him to find his wife, too, because like he doesn't want that to be the last memory of his wife, obviously.
The guilt that there's this very simple husbandly duty that he didn't perform. And then she was kidnapped and eaten. Yeah,
by cannibals. Speaking of, so obviously, once again, a lot of those scenes happen, but eventually they reach the valley. The rescue party are ambushed by once again, this is what the movie calls them, but they're called the troglodytes. The rescuers kill 3, but Bruder is injured, choosing to sacrifice himself rather than live as a cripple, which, we mentioned the guy with the leg as a cripple earlier. Like, everybody gets crippled in this fucking movie, like, really. Hunt and Chicory are captured and imprisoned in a cave.
Much like the Old West.
Yeah, that's actually very true.
Your chances of being maimed
were pretty high.
Larger.
Yeah. But so we finally actually get, like, a real on-screen introduction to these savages, these troglodytes, whatever the movie wants to call them. And Hunt and Chicory are captured and imprisoned in a cave. And the next trivia fact I have here is the cave set in this movie was actually the same cave set used in the Iron Man movie, the first one, where Tony Stark is held captive and constructs the first Iron Man suit, which I thought was a very interesting little trivia fact.
I bet that cave has probably been used in a lot of films then, huh? Because one of the things that I've read in just film trivia books is there aren't a lot of caves really in America that you can film in. And so when you see a cave in a movie, it tends to be used over and over.
Yeah, in fact, I remember when I was watching the special features, they shot this movie roughly about a half an hour away from Los Angeles. So I assume that's probably a very well-used cave historically, would be my guess.
Fun little millennials are old, just nerd tidbit. And Taylor, you've probably heard this before. The cave in Army of Darkness that he pulls in the original Army of Darkness, he pulls the Oldsmobile into a cave at the end, right? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, yes.
That's the Bat Cave from the 60s Batman show.
Is it really? That's so funny.
It was like the only cave in California, like right outside of Hollywood. And so it's like whenever an iconic series from like the 60s to the 90s needed a cave, it was that one.
So Hunt and Chicory are in prison near Samantha and Nick. She explains the troglodytes have already killed and eaten Purvis. And this is the most infamous scene in the movie, and it's one that everybody fucking talks about. The group then witnesses Nick stripped, brutally scalped, and bisected alive and then consumed. Now, it is a gnarly scene. Like,
it's gross.
It's gross as shit. So yeah, they scalp him, and then they like take the like dagger and they like stab him through the throat with his like scalped fucking head. And then like, yeah, they cut him in half. And I swear to God, it's either his dick or like a pile of shit or something is like coming out of the end where they like
I saw that
him
as
in
shit.
half.
Yeah.
And it's just disgusting. Like legitimately,
Oh
I remember watching it, and obviously, you know, it's meant to be horrifying, and of course it is. But I was just so taken aback by it that I was laughing. I'm like, they really put that in this fucking movie, almost out of nowhere. Like, it is building though. Like the violence is building.
The violence builds on a curve. It's crescendos in that moment.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've said repeatedly, not in defense of Zahler as a person or his politics, but in defense of his filmmaking, is right that he seems, I think, very self-aware, and he seems very much to have grown up on exploitation films. So he is coming from a certain school of thought that's like, I need what you'd call the Walker scene. And he has one in every single one of his movies. The Walker scene is, of course, the moment where if a filmgoer in the theater is going to walk out, this is the scene where it's going to happen. And he has one of those in every single movie he has because people want to see that. They want to see this nasty, repellent thing. This is like a classic Walker scene. It's grotesque and you can't look away from it. And when you're watching it happen, at least for myself, when I watch the scene happen, I'm waiting for the camera to cut away. I'm waiting to go, it's not going to just show this guy get fucking cut in half and disemboweled and his guts thrown out. But it literally is. No cuts that I recall. Also, right center in the frame, you just see it, man.
Yeah, fucking demolished. Holy shit. But yeah, no, yeah, he's just fucking cut in half, and they only really cut it like at one point, but I think it was probably just because they probably couldn't make the prosthetic look good enough. But other than that, they show the whole fucking thing. Like, it's gnarly as fuck. It's wild. And also I do want to mention one more cast thing. So the main quote unquote troglodyte guy was the actor Geno Seegers, who played the mob guy who was alive in Brawl in Cell Block 99, the like guy who got in the prison or the shootout with the cops in the movie that lived and like beats up fucking Vince Vaughn's character in the basement of Cell Block 99. So I thought that was interesting.
I really do want to ask you, Taylor. I like this movie. It's a good movie. It's tough to watch. We've said Zahler pretty clearly reactionary, maybe even pretty far right. I don't know the guy, but if you told me that based on his movies, I wouldn't question it. Why do we think he made this movie about just evil Native Americans? Do we think so? The plausible deniability thing is, well, I'm of an older generation. I grew up with cowboys versus Indians movies, and we didn't think anything of it, so I just thought I'd do that. Now, that might be what he would say, but do we believe that?
I don't believe that, to be honest with you, because he's also not that old.
Right, I was thinking that too, but you could see him saying that, right? Claiming, well, I don't even think of it, because cowboys and Indians are just part of American folklore. But the thing, if he did claim that, and he would be, that this isn't that type of cowboys and Indian story. These are monster people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking over right now because I thought he was in his late 40s, but yeah, he's 51 years old. And
yeah,
that's not old enough to kind of get away with that kind of thinking. I'm sorry. If you're 70 or something, okay, maybe. But
and it's
51,
still wrong. It's still wrong,
yeah.
But you could at least say it. But and then Well, watching this, and I'm a big separate the art from the artist guy, big separate the art from its politics guy. Like, fuck, I listen to Gigi Allen. I'm not gonna fucking tut anyone for watching a movie. But why did he make this? Why do we think he made this story? What was he trying to express?
That's the thing I really don't know. Like, of course we talk about obviously very reactionary politics, but like if you're trying to make an argument about like the traditional reactionary American fucking tradition of like white supremacy, this is easily his most white supremacist movie. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
the other two really aren't that white supremacist really at all, like pretty much, but this one
No, I
very
think
much is.
I think Brawling Cell Block 99 could almost, if you tweet it, could be a based web movie.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously Direct Cross Concrete is also very reactionary, but it's not a very racist movie, at least in my opinion. Like,
No, that's more like that is a movie very humanizing to cops. It also doesn't make them look perfect. This is a movie, and well, it's a good movie. You know the infamous John Wayne Playboy interview?
I don't know the specifics of it, but I would
But you
probably
know that
guess.
that's the one where John Wayne says, "I'm a white supremacist. I believe that it was our duty as like representatives of England and of a Christian God to come to this country and take it away from Native Americans because they would have squandered it and we knew how to use it and God made it for us." If
Yeah,
you told me that Zahler read that interview and was like, "I got to make a movie about that," I don't know that. I don't know what Zahler's intention was, but when I watch this, I do think like, well, his intention wasn't good by my estimation. The best thing I could say about it is that he's such an edgelord contrarian that he's like, what if I made a movie with cowboys and cannibal Indians in 2015? Boy, that would sure piss off the snowflakes or whatever. That is the best possible interpretation of it, right?
oh God, speaking of snowflakes, so let's finish this up here. So Hunt then tricks several, once again, this is just what they're called in the movie, troglodytes into drinking liquor laced with opium tincture, with one dying while another becomes unconscious. Arthur follows his rescue. Oh yeah, and also it's like the most hopeless thing that could possibly happen, but the guy with a gangrenous leg is here to save the day. But he actually does save the day, which is really fucking funny.
Which, so I know I talk shit about this character, but it is kind of nice because he is the husband of the woman in peril. Like it's like, okay, maybe he should get to save the day, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And he kills a bunch of them. He also figures out because all these natives, they have like they don't speak like language or anything. Like they basically like blow like through their fucking neck because there's like bones of like various animals and stuff like that they've
Well,
implanted in their neck, which is also I don't really understand that. I think it's
and
interesting, but I don't really understand like
well,
okay.
the other
That,
thing is that they kind of don't get mad at me. They kind of communicate like apes through like gestures and grunts. I swear that's just what's in the movie, but they're kind of, and I kind of think with the weird thing of the blowing the bone dust and all that is that clearly there's no basis for that in actual like Native American tribes, to my knowledge. Like, and I wonder if almost Dollar is thinking that that gives him some sort of deniability. Like, well, this isn't based off of it.
well, that's really interesting too, because yeah, that was the thing that was actually fairly common in like European proto-historical, like Germanic figures and stuff, where they'd use like animal bones and like horns and stuff from animals to like communicate. But it's very interesting that they transfix that on native people when I don't think that was necessarily anything used by native tribes. So I think that's
I
very
mean,
interesting.
I'm no expert, but I've never heard of that in like Native American kind of myths or folklore or histories or anything.
I haven't either. So, but yeah, so eventually our cripple hero makes it to the cave after murdering a bunch of them. Then he like distracts him enough to basically get owned once again by these two guys. They fucking cut his gut open and like stick the burning flask in like his abdomen. Like when this movie is like very gnarly, like yeah, you said exploitation kind of violence in it. Like
Yeah.
it very much is. And he gets mortally wounded. Eventually, once again, our cripple hero comes to save the day. Hunt stays behind and is willing to just hold off whatever extra ones are around, I guess. And then as they're like leaving the cave, of course, Chicory and the Dwyers, they walk across two pregnant and limbless native women with their eyes caved in with like
Yeah.
spikes. And they
Yeah.
kind of mention that the professor kind of mentions that earlier. I can't remember who mentions that or something like that, but like he mentions that like they would rape and eat their mothers or something like that. And I'm thinking like, is that also what they're trying to
Yeah.
signify? It's
Definitely.
very interesting.
Definitely.
But anyways, they were able to escape from the cave. they hear some gunshots. They assume that fucking Hunt kills them all, and then they walk into the sunset, and that's the end of the movie. So yeah, that is the synopsis here of Bone Tomahawk. And before we get to our final thoughts, because we're definitely going to have some more final thoughts here, I want to get into our Amazon reviews. And I got a lot of Amazon reviews tonight. Some fairly short ones, but also a couple fairly long ones too. But I found one good review on each of the stars, which is the first time I've gotten that in a long time, because there was over 20,000 reviews for this on Amazon. So this took me a while to whittle down some good reviews here. But our first review here is from Big W, who gives us 5 stars, and maybe this guy has a big W of a review.
Big wiener.
Yeah, big wiener, yeah. And the header of the review says, "We stumbled across this little gem, and man, oh man, are we glad we did." And the body of the review says, "With the intent of watching some sort of a movie this evening with my significant other and a friend in the house, we didn't really know we were getting ourselves into when we got into Amazon Prime to pick out a movie. Because, I mean, come on, why not? Netflix is so yesterday, right? Winky face. We stumbled across this little gem, and man, oh man, are we glad we did. This movie is not as family-friendly as some might assume, and it has some pretty
Who
basic...
is assuming that?
Apparently a lot of people,
It's called
Brian...
Bone Tomahawk.
Trust me, Brian, a lot of people assumed that, trust me. And it has some...
Well, because it's a Western. Westerns haven't been family-friendly in like 60 years.
Like I said, once we get some more of these Amazon reviews, people were really hoping this was a different movie than it ended up being. And it has some pretty basic opera in the end, of very repetitive lyrics. But if you're into that sort of thing, then go for it. As far as the movie is concerned, though, you will be, period, entertained to say the least. The end. And a little addendum here. Shout out to my boys at Johnny's Steakhouse for helping to put this film on. Great flick. And they all say, parentheses, seed
What
photo,
kind of psychopath
please.
put this on in a fucking sports bar?
Yeah, right. And also the
Like-
photo attached is really funny. It's like a guy eating like a fucking plate of ribs or something.
Fucking Chive TV coming out of the speakers on one end while you're watching the fucking disemboweling scene from Bone Tomahawk.
Yeah. It's like that meme I mentioned with the Billy Jack movie where it's like a guy and a girl laying in bed and it's just the scene of the guy getting like bisected in half.
Lean over to your girlfriend and be like, girl, I would never do that to you.
He says, they pay me concessions for every view. Thanks. Got kids to feed. I really don't, but I like food. And that's a random photo. Google this movie and that's what shows up. Should tell you more about this movie. And WTF, Google, I expect better filter results by relevance. 0.0004 seconds, only 5.8 billion results. So this rambling schizophrenic man finally finished his review here. Like, I remember reading this review and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
But I just remember the first time I sat in Buffalo Wild Wings and they put on Bone Tomahawk. It was the perfect way to see that movie.
Oh my God, it's so funny. Oh God, in a less funny review here, we got Mr. Mambo, who gives us 4 stars. I wish he would have given it 5 stars, so I could have said
I was just
Mr.
gonna say,
Mambo
yeah.
number 5
Mr.
stars. And he says, good Western, but... And the body of the review says, and this was the highest rated review on Amazon for any of the entries here, so I had to include this one. So,
Oh, God.
and the body of the review says, 68 years young. I have always loved good Westerns, but there are few recent movies which approach The Searchers, Red River, Liberty Valance, the James Stewart classics, Shane, the Eastwood Leon collaborations, Once Upon a Time in the West, etc.
Just
Unforgiven
named
is...
every famous Western you could think of. Those movies have nothing in common.
Yeah. Unforgiven is a modern classic. The first Lonesome Dove is great, and I enjoyed Open Range, the Kurt Russell version of Tombstone.
Please
Well,
quit naming other movies. Also a big fan of Sam Raimi's Quick and the Dead.
Yeah.
Also, ever heard of Briscoe County Jr.? I've heard of it.
Bone Tomahawk has an A-list cast, the requisite weathered authentic look in both town and people, beautiful filming and dramatic lighting, solid writing, humor, intriguing plot. But late in the goings, there's a scene of complete and utter depraved brutality, which, to be honest, I wish I had not seen, and wish that I could unsee.
I thought you liked Westerns, bitch. I thought you liked High Plains Drifter. I thought you liked The Wild Bunch. I thought you were a rugged frontiersman. I thought you saw all the classic Westerns, you fucking pussy. I'm sorry.
But that's the thing, Brian. All graphic violence ends with you shoot a guy and then he falls like down in a pratfall, and that's the end of it. That's all the violence that took place.
He falls like a mill of horse feed.
Yeah. Oh my God. This line is so fucking hilarious because this is the dumbest thing I've read in a while. This graphic butchery never would have been shown if this had been filmed in the 50s, 60s, 70s, probably even up to 2000.
The Wild Bunch came out in like 1967.
Also, by the way, the 70s, not known for grindhouse exploitation violence at all. Like, what the fuck?
How old is this fucker?
This guy's
He's has to be like
years.
a Zoomer.
No, this guy's like 70. This guy's like probably 70 now.
Literally, one of the most obvious like reference points for this is The Wild Bunch, which is one of the most extreme Hollywood productions ever.
Yeah.
Makes this movie look pretty tame, to be honest. And he's like, all right, they never would have made this in the 60s.
Guy was fucking watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory or whatever. That's the only movie he watched until like fucking 3 days ago.
He was watching Willy Wonka. He's going, boy, this is a fucked up Western, but I kind of like it because I'm kind of sick.
Yeah. Now practically anything goes. Audiences today seem unbothered by, and perhaps even relish seeing this brutality.
No, people were bothered by it. That's why he put it in the movie. Like, audiences aren't unbothered by it. The point of it is to bother you and get under your skin. God, people, I'm sorry.
Certainly one can become inured to it. Is it possible to become addicted to it? Is that progress? And then he also attached a picture of him like
so much for the tolerant left.
He also looks exactly like Rob Reiner, and he has like his fucking like he has like an
Get
eyebrow.
The fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of here! He's doing the Rock eyebrow.
Yeah,
the people's eyebrow.
Yeah, he's doing the fucking like DreamWorks face in his like photo.
Boy, all these video games these kids play, they aren't even bothered by seeing shit fall out of this guy's stomach when he gets ripped open.
Oh, God. So that leads into our next
motherfucker.
Review. Oh, man.
I fucking hate the Amazon reviews. They fucking bum me out so much, Taylor. They put me in such a bad mood sometimes.
Well, you want to talk about another one that'll put you in a bad mood here. So, Tanker Yanker gives this 3 stars.
Tanker Yanker.
Tanker Yanker gives us 3 stars. And the head of the review says, who is to say that this could not have happened? And the body of the review says, oh, Jesus.
Holy shit. Start over. Say it again.
Yeah. Who is to say that this could not have happened? And the
body, review.
Yeah. And the body of the review says, is this a Western or sci-fi in the Old West? The sheriff did not get his man. I felt bad for the breeding women at the end. I guess that says a lot when your own women don't want you, so you have to cut off their arms and legs and blind them so that you not get away from you.
Literally, the only person dumber than the fucking Mambo guy. This guy's like, boy, they must have cut up that lady because she didn't love him.
Was that supposed to be an allegory for women? Was the cannibalism supposed to be an allegory for veganism? So many questions left unanswered.
Yeah, that's an allegory for veganism the way Troll 2 is an allegory for veganism.
Did fucking Carl Buchner write this? Like, what the fuck?
This is one of the best fucking reviews ever. Imagine watching this movie and going, you know, this could have happened. Watching this scene where the guy gets ripped in half and going, you know, this is pretty much what it was like back then.
Yeah. The veganism thing made me laugh because I'm like, fucking Sean Mutaki wrote this. Like, what the fuck?
You could, well, the who's to say that this couldn't have happened? You could say that about literally almost any movie.
Yeah.
Also, what does he mean by the sci-fi thing? Is he's being sarcastic, I guess?
I think he's trying to say because like the quote unquote troglodytes had like bones in their neck and they were speaking like aliens.
Okay. I thought maybe he was trying to be like smug. He's like, is this a Western or is it a sci-fi? Because that's how crazy it is.
Oh, God. So our next review here is from a very famous individual. So Mickey Mouse gives this 2 stars. And then the review says, near the end, just gross. And the body of the review says, near the end of the movie, there is a gross scene. Why do they put such a scene? Some people say, wow, what a scene. How do they think of such a thing to toss in a movie?
This is Donald Trump. He's like, did you see this? At the end of the film, there's a very gross scene. Very, very gross. Some people watch it, they go, wow, what a scene. Me, I don't like it. It's too gross.
Then the 5-minute butt scene from a man. Thanks,
The 5-minute butt scene? What? What? I don't recall.
I think it's another ESL person, I'm guessing. Oh, God, this gets better. Most of the movie, bunch of walking around, talk. Then at the end, the cripple saves the day. How did he get on top of it? To the cave? To the cave float up there. Did like the beautiful woman, so I gave it 2 stars.
Okay, this is a great review. Yeah. Okay, let's hang on. This could be a useful review to someone. Not me, I like the movie, but like someone could read this review and go, you know what? He told me there's a gross scene in it. I don't want to see that. He also told me there's a butt scene. Don't want to see a man butt. Do want to see a pretty lady. Weighing the pros and cons, you know, I think I'm going to watch this or not. Could be a useful review Talk, 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 walking around.
And the cripple saves the day and he floats up to
The
the
cripple
cave.
saves ridiculous. The cripple saves it. He calling the character the cripple.
Yeah, he does. He says the cripple saves the day.
Like he's mad about it.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. So our last review here is from a very angry gentleman, Dennis, who gives this 1 star. And the head of the review says, ridiculously stupid movie. And the body of the review says, I paid for it, so I had to watch it.
I mean, like, not really.
Yeah, he very much fell into the sunk cost fallacy.
Did you get your money back when you finished it? No.
I also went on this guy's profile because I'm like, oh, this is probably some woke SJW. And his profile pic is no bullshit, like a 75-year-old man wearing a MAGA hat.
Oh.
Which makes me think, like, this movie was made for you. What the fuck?
Yeah. No shit. Well, the thing is, though, it's a good movie, so they won't like it.
Oh, that's actually very true, yeah.
Because Zahler movies, well, to you and me, we watch this and we go, this is like borderline fascist. There's some ugly politics here. But an actual, like, boomer MAGA guy or gal is so literal and so lizard-brained that this is too morally ambiguous for them.
That's actually a good point. Like, I was making the joke earlier in our intro that, like, this movie's woke. It does this. Like, I bet you anything, like, a lot of people watched the scene in the bar with the professor and, John Bruder and everyone and thought, oh, this scene's woke. I bet you there was at least, like, 50,000 boomers that watched this and were like, this is the most woke scene I've ever seen.
This is true. Beyond that, though, I bet there are even, if we're talking like mega boomers, and I don't mean to get all Trump bad or whatever, but Trump is bad. But even the scene, our character who prides himself on having killed so many Native Americans, I could even see some like Trump boomer being mad that character could be they're like, well, they made this bad guy who kills Indians. That's anti-white,
Oh, for sure, 100%.
Why did they have to make this character that you could possibly interpret as morally wrong? He kills that Mexican guy,
Yeah, I mean, obviously this movie is very reactionary and I would say pretty explicitly fascist in its viewpoint.
Oh, yeah.
But like, this is one of the few movies that's like a Western that at least acknowledges that like lawmen in the West were mass murderers of Native people. Like, there aren't a lot of them that fully admit that, but this one actually did.
Well, that's why I think that the two movies that kind of have shadows looming over this are, again, The Wild Bunch and High Plains Drifter, which are the other two movies where I think you're like, oh, this is a movie about like a desolate, hellish world,
And it fucking was 100%. Like, just, it was an ugly, violent world.
Maybe someday, I mean, we got other stuff on the pipeline, so we won't rush it. Maybe we'll do some other Westerns sometime just because they'll be fun to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, that, or especially, I love neo-Westerns. So if you want to recommend a neo-Western, I would 100% watch that shit for fucking sure.
Well, I mean, of course, like, you've seen Unforgiven. I know you have, right?
I don't think I have, actually, believe it or not.
Well, we'll put a pin in that. We'll talk about it. There's some good choices in neo-Westerns to talk about.
Hell yeah. And well, speaking of, before we get into other Westerns, let's get into our final thoughts here. So I want to say real quick, I love S. Craig Zahler's movies. This is now our third and final one, even though it's the first one. So I love how, once again, we worked backwards here. I personally think I still like Dragged Across Concrete the most. I would say this is a close second and then Brawl. But to be honest with you, they're all pretty much neck and neck for me. I think, to me, the thing that really holds this back from being my favorite is, just and obviously this is the thing with all of S. Craig Zahler's movies, but the just absolutely abhorrent politics here are just so blatant that I can't separate it from the art to make it my favorite. I just can't. But I will say this is a very well-made movie. The performances are all great. I think the pacing is fantastic, even though obviously S. Craig Zahler is not really well known for pacing his movies in a way that most audiences would appreciate. But I appreciate the fact that he is willing to take his time to get to the inevitable conclusion. And he does a very good job at that. So this is another movie of S. Craig Zahler's that I would give a 100% recommendation to a specific audience. Not Amazon boomer reviewers, but a lot of other people.
And the thing with Zahler's pacing, right, is that he can kind of take a while to get the fire going. He kind of starts with a slow burn. But once his movies kick in, they don't let up. So I love all of Zahler's films. We've now talked about all of them, as you said, for the podcast. I think this film was the one that was easiest for me to jump into, but I also think that might be because by this point I'd become kind of familiar with his style. I would agree with you. All of Zahler's films are borderline fascist, if not fascist outright. But for instance, in Brawl and Cell Block 99, I think you can pretty literally separate that movie from its politics. If you want to, you can put blinders on to that movie's politics. To a lesser degree, maybe you can with Dragged Across Concrete. This movie is kind of just a weird, unpleasant story about manifest destiny. It's a very good movie and I enjoy it, but I agree. It is hard for me to separate it from that sort of subtext, or text.
Yeah, fucking absolutely. Like, yeah, it's just one of those things where, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, like this is a movie that is impossible to separate like the ideology from it. But if you can look past that, if you're not, a Native American individual, like this is a movie that I would 100% recommend. Absolutely. And, once again, just like with all S. Craig Zahler's movies, they are endlessly fascinating and endlessly discussable for fucking sure. So I am so glad we finished our trilogy of excellence, S. Craig Zahler here.
I'm a little sad that it's over. This is pretty fascinating filmmaker, and I'm glad that you've hipped me to him, Taylor, because I didn't know anything about him. And again, there is a lot to talk about here. And there is, to be sure, there is more to talk about in these films that, we've just scratched the surface of. I hope his next film is good. Every film he's made that I've seen has been above average and also pretty disconcerting. And I wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest.
I think his next film is going to be a romantic comedy. So we'll see. That's the thing that I want to see him tackle next. I want to see him tackle a 90s romantic comedy.
You said this as a bit, but then I was thinking, he's a pretty funny guy. He could, there is a sense of humor in his films. And then I was like, could he sort of do a romance? What is Zahler's version of a romance story? Well, I guess the primary relationship in Brawl and Cell Block 99, maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Because obviously there's relationships with stoic, very traditionally toxic, I would say toxic masculine male heroes. That is another thing in all of his movies too. Guys who are willing to just fuck up anybody to save their woman, but guys who aren't the most emotionally available with their women either.
In fact, that is a very hot couch guy thing. Boy, I might be cool and I keep it chill, but if you mess with my girlfriend, you do not want to see me once you mess with my girlfriend.
Oh, Jesus Christ. But yeah, so that is our review of Bone Tomahawk. So let's get into our pluggables here. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on twitter.com. And as well, please follow us on both our Spotify and our YouTube channel, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously. And as well, as always, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father GoFundMe page. They're getting donations all the time. And of course, as always, we want to see a part 2 to this fantastic little series. Let's make this dream a reality for our good friends, Scott, Shaun, and Robert.
And again, we, Taylor and I, will, within reason, match any donations to Lucifer and the Father that can prove that they came from our show. Any listeners that come in that donate to Shaun and Scott because of us, I will match up to $20 or $30, whatever you donate.
Exactly. And I will be willing to donate up to 20,000 Vietnamese dong, which I think is $3. No, I'm just kidding. I'll definitely donate more than that. But I will match as well up to what Brian said, about $25. I think that's more than reasonable per donation.
Yeah. Again, please follow us, Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram, and please on the Millennials Are Old Podcast Facebook page, which is the optimal place to, again, harass me, to send me any weird gossip about Zoomers, Boomers, Shroomers, or Coomers, and to spy on all of those very sweet and very well-intentioned Billy Jack fans that I encounter.
Exactly, yes. And you know what? Speaking of, yeah, if you know any goonettes out there, if you know any gooners, if you happen to know any crooners, what's the word I'm looking for here? What are the singers? It ends in the ER, I'm trying to think of.
Crooners?
Yes, if you know any crooners out there, please have them be on the show. We want to hear some good old-fashioned crooners on the show.
Well, I often think about how, I came up on the Something Awful forums. That's sort of, as I said before, my internet origin story. And it's so funny that the word goon and goonie and all these phrases have changed so drastically. Because sometimes I want to brag about how hip I was in the late 2000s to Zoomers, and I'll say, yeah, I used to post on Something Awful, and we'd all be goony together, me and a bunch of older guys. I felt so cool because I was getting goony with all of these older guys on the Something Awful forums. It was all about gooning, and they just stare at me,
Yeah, and of course, talking about Zoomers and all that, of course, we know the teens are very cool with, open displays of gooning. we're obviously very familiar with that. They always love gooning all the time and talking about it with their friends and not being weird about it.
Well, that's the thing too, is that I recently had a colleague at my store briefly was working there who was 18 and had just graduated. And what he was saying was that, yeah, he knows a lot of people his age who are weird and puritanical. And then it seems like the rest of them all become like almost like hyper reactionary and obnoxious because they feel like the alternative is to be weird about sex. I don't know. It was very disturbing to hear as an aging millennial. The kids are not all right.
Yeah, they really are fucking not. Because obviously people our age, I mean, we're just too old to fuck anymore, so we don't really have like a sex drive. But I can tell you what, when I was younger, I was horny as shit. And like I was totally fine with all displays of horniness. But yeah, kids these days, not really cool with it, it seems. It's very strange.
Nobody's fucking anymore. That's just what the numbers bear out. And that might be millennials' fault. That might have to do with our unbelievable soyness permeating through later generations.
No, I mean, that's the thing. And, a lot of filmmakers are trying to bring back the horniness to Gen Z. There was that Challengers movie that just came out as of recording. There was
Pretty
Saltburn
horny.
that came out. Both those movies are some of the horniest movies I've ever seen in like the last fucking like 5 years. Like just so horny. And they came out with like fucking 6 months from each other. It's crazy. Like,
I mean, it
goddamn.
almost seems like a conscious thing. Like some filmmakers were like, we got to get horny with it.
Yeah, we got to get young, hot stars being fucking horny. And I think we can describe that is definitely what S. Craig Zahler's movies are. Young actors who are really horny. I think we can describe
Honestly, some of the least horny films I've ever seen.
Which is hilarious because there well, not really in Brawl and also not in drag. Yeah, because there's literally one sex scene in Bone Tomahawk and it's the least sexy sex scene of all time.
I wouldn't call what happens to that guy sex, Taylor, personally.
Brian, I wasn't even thinking about that, right? I was thinking of what Hunt and Chicory were doing when they're eating each other's chowder, if you know what I mean.
Eating your chowder.
It tastes like corn. And it's like, yeah, exactly. You felched it out.
Oh my God.
By the way,
Right.
we talk about hot couch guy things. One last thing. That is what Jonathan Davis says is the origin for the band name Korn.
You have told me that. I don't believe it.
I don't believe it either. Absolute bullshit. I don't believe that for a second, but that's what he says. Oh God. But yeah, so you know what? Speaking of, we've talked about horniness, we've talked about horny movies. I think it's time that I go to bed, Brian, because you know what? I have a bit of a bone to pick with my bed because I haven't slept on it at all, like since this morning.
Well, I'm going to give you guys a little peek behind the old millennial curtain. Basically, part of my nightly ritual after I go on my old man walks where I listen to podcast or music is I come home and I listen to or I watch old comedy stuff till I fall asleep. And tonight, this is very old millennial coded. I think before bed, I am going to make some dinner and I am going to watch Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
That sounds like a fun ass time.
Well, it sounds very millennial coded, I think.
It does. And speaking of millennial coded, sleep is also very millennial coded at this moment. So have a good night, everybody.